strange subterranean realms that few of us will ever see, miners fearlessly work in one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Mines are environments loaded with danger, and when accidents happen, they are all too often fast and deadly.
Here, you stay on this right side. Nice, we got everybody. We found him. We believe it to be John Gibson.
A cave-in or an explosion in a mine can be disastrous, and a miner's life can suddenly hang on a thread. Mines exist in a world of perpetual night, where there are seldom second chances. Here, a miner's most precious commodity can be the will to survive a cave-in. At the Enlow Fork coal mine in western Pennsylvania, the swing shift is about to start its 10-hour day. These men will be working 75 stories below the Earth's surface. They have one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. The life of a coal miner is never an easy one. To work each day deep inside the earth requires a special temperament. Though the pay may be good, the environment is filled with hazards. The rock face could be leaking deadly methane gas, a colorless and odorless substance which can turn fresh air into a flammable poison ready to ignite. Walls may suddenly tumble, bringing massive inundation of water from concealed underground streams. And even with the most modern mining machinery, there is always the fear of fire, smoke, and suffocation.
Canvas checked a little bit low.
A coal miner may work for years safely and without incident. But in the back of their minds is a fear that the next shift may be their last. Most of the world's coal mining takes place underground. Coal itself is actually the 300-million-year-old remains of prehistoric vegetation that grew primarily in swamps and peat bogs. Today, this highly combustible organic rock produces almost 40% of the electricity generated worldwide. The underground mining of coal is essentially performed in two ways. The first way is through an ingenious technique called long wall mining. Sharp, pointed-tooth shears cut and remove coal at the face of the exposed coal seam. Partially automated, hydraulic-powered supports temporarily hold up the roof while the coal is extracted. The coal is immediately sent along a conveyor belt to the surface. The roof over where the coal has been removed is then allowed to collapse, and the hydraulic roof supports advance forward. It's like a controlled cave-in, except in this case, nearly 1,000 feet of a mountain is allowed to drop, filling in space where the coal once was. The second way is with specialized heavy-duty machines called continuous miners, which rapidly scrape out the coal, leaving behind a network of empty rooms. The coal travels on a conveyor belt from the ravenous mouth of the continuous miner through its belly to a long conveyor belt and ultimately to the surface where it is processed. In a strange twist of fate, one such machine actually saved the life of a coal miner from West Virginia. Such was the fate of Donzel Cutlip. He was helping to operate a continuous mining machine when tragedy struck. Above Donzel's head, hairline cracks in the roof of the mine suddenly split open, The result was a massive cave-in.
As I was going towards the miner, the rock hit the top of my hard hat, and just all of a sudden, the mountain started shoving me down. And it took me right down flat. And it was awful.
The cave-in sent tons of rock crashing down, instantly killing 3 other miners working nearby. Nearly 8 feet of rock landed on top of Donzel, pinning him to the ground. Remarkably, Donzel's life was spared by the continuous miner, which in fact had shielded his head from the tremendous weight of the fallen rock. Unfortunately, he was now hopelessly pinned down under the machine, unable to move any part of his body.
There was so much weight on me that my clothes were bloody, where it squeezed the blood out of my pores. That's how much pressure I was under that 8 foot of rock.
He called for help, but with his co-workers now dead and the roof collapsed all around him, his cries went unheard.
I could just take little short breaths of air, just enough to keep me awake and alive. But I never did go unconscious. If it wasn't for my wife and my kids, I'd have gave up under the ground.
Eventually, some miners who had been working nearby heard Donzel calling for help beneath the rubble. The miners quickly mobilized into action. Using slate bars and anything else that was available, they began to frantically dig. Rescuers soon joined in the effort and worked for hours trying to remove the massive amount of rock that was now on top of Donzel. Finally, Donzel was pulled out of the rescue hole.
Approximately 14 hours I was under there. That's how I lost my arms. They were pinned under my chest, and it cut the circulation off of them for so long that they couldn't get them to come back.
Though Donzel Cutlip lost the use of both of his arms that day in the cave-in, he was lucky to walk away with his life.
Rockfalls are a terribly difficult part of any underground operation. You know, the old maxim is that Mother Nature hates a vacuum, and Mother Nature is going to correct that by filling in that vacuum. So that in a mine setting, as soon as you open up that mine, by virtue of cutting a swath out of the underground location, you have, in effect, created a place that is ultimately going to fall.
Well, it's getting heavy, guys.
Hey, we're going to turn to the left right here, guys.
Okay, going left.
Hold on. Watch, there's a cable right here on the floor. Okay, we're stepping over the cable right here. Watch yourself. Everybody okay?
When an unexpected cave-in or an underground fire or flood does happen, it is the job of mine rescuers to try and save lives.
Watch that trailing cable.
See anything? Everything looks good.
The work can be terrifying and potentially deadly. And there are many accounts of the rescuers themselves getting trapped, having been virtually eaten alive by the earth. But without their bravery, all hope for survivors would be lost.
Sooner or later, everybody that's involved with it knows that that phone call could come and you might have to go. And you're only going to be called if something bad has already happened. You're going to try and pick up the pieces. But you're going to go and you're going to help either your own fellow employees at the mine that you work at or fellow miners at another mine.
At a coal mine in Borken, Germany, an explosion caused a massive cave-in of a deep underground mine. Initially, rescue workers thought all 57 workers in the mine were killed. After 3 days of unsuccessful rescue attempts, there was little hope that any of the miners would be found alive. But when rescuers found a shaft free of gas, they lowered a microphone and heard the sound of trapped miners shouting. Rescuers risking their own lives were immediately lowered down thousands of feet into a fresh air tunnel. Miraculously, 6 workers survived by finding a pocket of air. One by one, the survivors were put on stretchers and lifted to the surface. From Germany to the Ukraine, Pakistan to Great Britain, the courageous efforts of rescuers around the world has saved the lives of thousands of trapped miners who might otherwise have perished in the dark recesses of the earth.
Ironically, the rescued victims may never know their rescuers, but the rescuer's job is simply a duty. And in a successful rescue operation, the main goal is to get the victims out quickly, ensuring their safety and health. It's all very rushed and busy, but the main goal is to get the person out alive. It is very satisfying to rescue a person alive and healthy.
It's been a very emotional event for them in their life. Particularly, I remember one individual that particular day that he had not said to his wife that he loved her. And that was prior to going into the mine. And he said, if you ever had that feeling that you were in an airplane heading for the ground, he said that's the way he felt.
In these life or death situations, rescuers need every advantage they can get. And to help them, technology is evolving to a point where rescuers can now save trapped miners in ways which were once thought impossible.
Okay, guys, let's line up right here and we'll put our apparatuses on before we go any further.
What every miner fears the most is a fire. Whether caused by an explosion or by an equipment malfunction, for the miner, escape can quickly become impossible.
Okay. Okay, you're sitting on about 1,800 PSI. How you feel? Okay. Virgil? You're, looks like about 22. How you feel?
I feel fine, Charlie.
Okay. Watch your top.
Mine rescue teams know that as they search for trapped miners, dangers are all about. One of their most terrifying enemies is both colorless and odorless.
Okay, hey, Virgil.
Deadly gases like methane and carbon monoxide can only be located by using sensitive detection devices.
Zero methane.
Methane is highly explosive and can be triggered by the slightest spark.
0.702.
Rescuers also have sophisticated devices that can help them determine which way air or other gases are flowing in the mine. They could help determine the direction of oxygen, methane, or even smoke from an underground fire.
That marked on the map. And right here, we'll stay out of it.
It's on this right side, right here, see, mark.
How much time we got?
Smoke obscures vision and constricts the oxygen supply, which can lead to asphyxiation and death.
Guys, watch it. Anything?
You don't know which way to go. There's miles and miles of complex entries underground, and you're not sure whether you're getting closer to the fire. You're not sure whether you're getting further away from the fire.
Okay, we're stepping over the cable right here. Watch yourself.
The fire itself can cause support columns to burn, bringing about massive cave-ins, trapping miners.
Just another canvas check.
With no way out and every breath becoming more difficult, it is likely for a trapped miner to panic.
Turn to the right.
Worst case scenario during a mine fire would probably be that he's probably thinking about his family.
You know, whether he, kissed his children goodbye that morning or kissed his wife goodbye. And probably saying to himself that he's probably not going to see them anymore.
Okay, let's go, guys. Let's start advancing here.
When mine rescue teams enter a mine, they know that seconds count when trying to find trapped miners. The quicker they can get to victims, the better chance they'll have to bring them out alive.
The people who do mine rescue have got to be some of the most courageous people on this earth. There have been at least one episode I know where a mine had a disaster. The mine rescue team went in to recover or rescue, and the mine blew up again and killed the mine rescue team. And every mine rescue team member today knows that that happened. And so they know that they're risking their lives when they go in.
Rescue teams in exercises like this train year-round, honing skills they hope they'll never be called on to use.
It's almost like a battle. You carefully explore into the mine, you secure an area behind you, you move up, explore some more, you secure that area until you recover the entire mine.
New technologies are being developed to give rescuers every advantage. Thermal imaging cameras, like this one, allow mine rescuers to see through even the thickest smoke.
When you're 40, 50 feet away from that thermal image, you would see that it is a body of some sort. And you would be able to actually direct the team directly up to the body to determine whether the missing person or missing miner is alive and conscious or does it need medical attention.
These devices can detect temperature differences of 1/2 degree Fahrenheit. An unconscious miner could be easily spotted and rescued using these new high-tech eyes.
Okay, I have them.
Another tool rescuers can now use are electric robots. Law enforcement personnel have been using these steel enforcers for years, often putting them in harm's way. Even when shot at, the robot escapes with only a few dents and a broken wire. A person put in that situation might not have been so lucky. These tireless robots can enter almost any type of dangerous and even deadly environment, including underground ones, and send back information to a rescue team via an onboard fiber optic cable.
Well, because it has onboard cameras, we would be able to search throughout the mine to try to locate trapped miners, and we might find some clues such as a hard hat that became dislodged, or some other piece of equipment that would give us some clue as to the whereabouts of the miner.
With an 8-hour power supply and a robotic arm that can extend almost 5 feet, this machine could someday be called upon to be the key member of a rescue team. But even with all this new technology, there is nothing that can replace a miner's own instinct for survival. Deep underground, tragedy can strike at any time. Mining coal or other minerals was often a primitive affair. Bootleg mines would often operate without maps, and once a mine was abandoned, there was no way to know for sure which way a tunnel had been mined. As time went by, many mines became forgotten and began to flood.
We find that mine maps, especially in abandoned areas, are very inaccurate because they're best guesses as to where that particular mine was based on old maps. Some of those old maps are not very accurate, and that's one of the reasons that there may have been a problem in this particular case.
West Virginia coal miner Wade Hinkle and his crew were mining a new shaft when disaster struck. The drilling car at the mine face unexpectedly cut into an old, unchartered shaft from a mine that had been abandoned years before. That old mine had since filled with water, and almost instantly, the mine Hinkle was working in began to flood. He suddenly found himself in waist-deep water, struggling to stay alive, when there was an explosion.
At that time, the mine blew up. I first thought it was a fire center that blew. Well, when it blew, it was a tremendous roar. Fire flashed up the entry, and I thought, well, the whole wall's collapsed. This whole mine, all that water has come to at one time, and I became scared.
When all the lights went out, Hinkle was thrust into a terrifying darkness. He began to choke as the air became thick with smoke.
And dust was in suspension, tremendous amount of dust. You couldn't see anything. I could hear the belt running, number 1 belt.
A conveyor belt, which drew power from an outside source, was still in operation. Hinkle somehow managed to crawl out of the flooded chamber and made it to the conveyor belt, which eventually took him outside of the mine to safety. Hinkle survived, but when water breaches a mine unexpectedly, the results can be disastrous. Such was the case at the Knox Coal Company in Port Griffith, Pennsylvania. This coal mine was located alongside and underneath the Susquehanna River. At 11:12 in the morning, one of the workers in the mine looked up and saw the roof suddenly give way. Unbelievably, the Susquehanna River had somehow invaded the mine. 81 employees reported for work that day. 27 miners were still missing. The miners that immediately escaped were happy to be alive as they learned the magnitude of the cave-in. Families waited anxiously near the mine entrance for any news about their loved ones. The new governor of Pennsylvania, who had only been in office for 3 days, immediately visited the site and offered help. In the first 60 hours of the emergency, almost 3 million gallons of water poured underground, forming a massive whirlpool near the riverbank. An extraordinary plan was quickly devised to plug up the hole. It involved dumping rail cars into the river in hopes of obstructing and eventually clogging the opening. Initially, railroad hopper cars, each weighing 50 tons, were pushed into the river. Like a child's bathtub toy, spectators watched helplessly as the river swallowed up each rail car. Only after an additional 400 one-ton coal cars and 25,000 cubic yards of dirt, rock, and boulders were dumped into it was the hole finally plugged. An investigation later revealed that a new tunnel had been quarried under the river without being surveyed properly. At one point, only a few feet of rock stood between the tunnel and the river. Eventually, this fragile roof could not support the immense weight of the Susquehanna River, and it caved in. A special investigating committee was created, and the focus of the probe narrowed to August Lippy, a high official of the United Mine Workers who proved a most reluctant witness.
Stand by my previous answer.
Just say you don't want to reply. You don't have to say you stand by your answer. Just tell me you want to take...
You're not going to put words into my mouth.
I'm not trying to put words into your mouth.
Lippy had good reason to be evasive. He was later named as a secret owner of the Knox mine, his union connections helping to allow dangerous mining practices to go uncorrected. The Knox mine disaster proved that understanding the characteristics of rock can be a matter of life and death for miners.
Mankind has been underground since cavemen. We have looked at the upside of the earth from the rocks and from caves for eons. We ought to be able to get better at understanding that distance between the cave or mine and the rock strata above it.
Danny Terry, a coal miner, learned firsthand how potentially deadly the rocks above him can be. He was driving a piece of mining equipment called a ram car when disaster suddenly struck. A huge rock in the ceiling above came crashing down.
I saw and heard the top crack, and I reached to crank up my car, and it happened so quick. The next thing I heard was just an unbelievable crash. When the rock fell, because it was just all at once, because it was just one solid rock. And the next thing I knew, the top had me pushed down in my shuttle car, and the canopy was just right in my face, and that's when I just started looking to try to find a way out.
Luckily, the cab he was sitting in was protected by a new safety feature, a heavy-duty steel canopy above his head. But now he was trapped.
The weight of this rock was estimated somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,400 to 3,500 tons. With that weight on top of the car, as you can see, the wheels are turned outward. Danny had to escape out from the side and came directly out toward me.
After the rock fall, and I was laying in the ram car waiting to get out, that did cross my mind, of not being able to get out.
The ram car he was driving was crushed like an egg by one of the largest single pieces of coal ever to have fallen from the ceiling of a mine. One of the most important ways miners can prevent cave-ins is through the use of roof supports. A common technique involves 6-foot-long roof bolts and wire mesh. A special machine drills the bolts into the ceiling of the mine. These bolts and wire mesh help to bind the rock layers together, preventing roof falls. Understanding how a roof is supported is the key to preventing cave-ins. Roof supports are the backbone of any mine operation and are called upon to literally lift the weight of the world. The testing of all new roof support systems takes place at a state-of-the-art government testing facility outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Built at a cost of over $10 million by the MTS Systems Corporation, the Mine Roof Simulator is the biggest crushing device in the world.
Well, as an engineer, when I first heard about this machine, actually I was a very young engineer at the time, it was scary. The purpose of the machine is to allow us to simulate the weight of that rock so that we can design roof support structures to hold up the roof to keep the opening stable while the men are in there working.
This machine can apply 3 million pounds of pressure. That's the equivalent weight of 50 rail cars stacked one on top of another.
In terms of the control of the machine, although it's very powerful, we could take an automobile and crush it down to the thickness of a piece of paper. We can also put an egg in there and crack the egg without completely smashing it. So it's very powerful, but it has a lot of control to it.
3 roof support systems are being simultaneously tested. In this high-speed footage, we can actually see the bottom of this giant crusher moving upward to apply the enormous pressure. The concrete-filled steel tube maintains its fundamental shape and support characteristics. The cinder blocks, however, quickly crack and fall apart. But surprisingly, the wood blocks placed in a new cribbing design also proved to have excellent support characteristics. High technology is also being used to help miners trapped in cave-ins. One of the hardest job mine rescuers must do in a cave-in is locate miners who might be trapped thousands of feet below the Earth's surface. The Mine Safety and Health Administration has actually developed a highly sensitive listening system which uses portable earthquake detectors.
The seismic location system is a very sensitive listening device that can detect miners down to 2,000 feet. This system can actually locate trapped miners underground, give locations so that trapped miners can be found and then drilled down to and rescued through the surface if mine rescue team members were not able to do so underground.
A trapped miner would use whatever material is available, perhaps pounding on the roof of the mine with a timber. Those signals will be picked up on the surface and a location pinpointed for rescuers. But most times, locating a victim is only half the problem. The real challenge is how to rescue a miner who has been buried alive. Mine emergency response units have many tools at their disposal, but one of the most unique is the borehole probe TV system. Capable of operating to depths of 1,500 feet, this specially designed video camera probe is encased in a unique housing that prevents it from setting off an explosion in a methane environment. This device helps give rescuers the eyes they need to find miners who have been trapped by cave-ins. But it also has been used to save the lives of people caught in similar circumstances on the surface of the Earth as well. On September 19, 1985, a massive earthquake registering 8.1 on the Richter scale struck central Mexico, devastating a large part of Mexico City. 10,000 people were killed and 50,000 people were injured as over 800 buildings collapsed and immediately turned to rubble. Rescuers worked around the clock to save helpless victims trapped under mountains of concrete. Some of the rescue teams were even equipped with dogs that could sniff out trapped victims. But one of the most effective pieces of equipment was the Mine Emergency Unit's borehole camera. At the Nueva Leon apartment building, it was called into use when rescuers thought they might be getting close to some victims. The camera was quickly sent down, and what appears to be part of the rubble blinks. In the blink of an eye, a survivor is located. The woman and her husband, who were both trapped inside the collapsed building, were brought out alive. They had been completely buried for 4 days in total darkness, a living death, with no possibility of getting out on their own. Thanks to the borehole probe TV camera, they escaped certain death. The terrifying fear of cave-ins is shared by miners across the world. In Bolivia, primitive mining conditions greatly increase the risks of deadly cave-ins. To help counter the danger, miners go through a ritual each day before work. They make offerings to the spirit guardians of the mine. These miners know that a cave-in can strike at any time, and they must constantly be on alert. Technology is not the most modern or the safest. 16-year-old Pedro, a miner since he was 10, has learned to make do with outdated equipment, including unreliable explosives. Invariably, accidents do happen. Today, rescuers have a fighting chance to save trapped miners. But at the beginning of the 20th century, they were almost helpless in the face of some of the biggest and worst cave-ins the world has ever seen. Coal has been used as a fuel source for thousands of years. During the Roman Empire, there was international trade in coal. And by 1226, London was receiving regular shipments of coal by sea. Coal fueled the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s, and it helped to power the electric era in the early 20th century. Coal was responsible for many of the conveniences of modern life, but it came at a price. To meet ever-increasing demand, children, some as young as 8 years old, worked in the coal mines. Boys were hired to sort coal for 10 to 11 hours a day. A moment's inattention by a child might mean the loss of several fingers in the machinery. Nippers were little boys who opened heavy doors as coal cars approached. They often sat in the dark for up to 12 hours a day. A boy in his early teens might be allowed to be a mule driver. When the teenager was able to drive a 6-mule team, he was entitled to a man's wages. Explosions, cave-ins, and other mining accidents took the lives of many children. And it wasn't until 1916 that the first federal child labor law, signed by Woodrow Wilson, was finally enacted. At the turn of the century, the discharge of poisonous gases in mines was not fully understood. To detect deadly carbon monoxide gas, miners turned to Mother Nature for assistance. The expression, "canary in a coal mine," is based on the extensive use of these birds by miners until the 1930s. A miner would take a caged canary with him to the mine as a sort of insurance policy. If the oxygen supply became compromised, these sensitive birds would sway noticeably on their perches before falling unconscious. For the miner, this was a clear signal of trouble. The birds were so widely used that the rescuers even carried special canary resuscitation cages into the mines with them. Unfortunately, at the turn of the century, safety was not a priority, and rescuers were often needed. Although the equipment evokes images of Jules Verne, rescue crews in the early 1900s were perfecting skills that would evolve into the modern rescue crews of today.
Railroads, steel companies, electric companies all demand increased amounts of product. And that led to a dramatic increase in the size of our mining community. With that was a terrible increase in the number of people killed in the mines. The worst year was 1907.
In that year, it's estimated that almost 4,000 miners died in mining accidents. It was also the year of the worst mine disaster in United States history. On September 6th at 10:20 a.m., an underground explosion ripped through a coal mine in West Virginia. The explosion was so violent that it caused the earth to shake as far as 8 miles away. The mine had suddenly collapsed in a massive cave-in. Frantically, volunteers tried to clear away the wreckage at the entrance of the mine, but they soon passed out from toxic mine air called the black damp and had to be rescued themselves. As the hours passed, people on the surface became more and more despondent. 362 miners perished that day, leaving behind over 1,000 widows and children. Only one man survived. Peter Urban was rescued about 100 feet below the surface after he was heard moaning near the opening to a shaft. When found, he was sitting on the shattered body of his brother while staring glassy-eyed into space as he sobbed uncontrollably. He was the only survivor of the Monongah disaster. Public outrage and a subsequent investigation led to the creation of the Bureau of Mines in 1910. Through their extensive research programs, the dangers of mining became better understood. Explosives were made safer, and more reliable rescue tactics were developed. With each passing decade, the annual number of deaths declined dramatically. But then, on November 20th, 1968, one of the worst mining disasters of modern times took the world by surprise. 99 miners went to work at the Consul No. 9 mine in Farmington, West Virginia that fateful morning. After a series of massive underground explosions, only 21 miners ever returned to the surface. Though the cause of the initial explosion at Farmington was never discovered, it led to the passage of much stricter safety laws and regulations. Farmington proved that much was still left to learn about explosions and the massive cave-ins they can cause. It is thought that many underground explosions are caused when methane, a colorless, odorless gas, is somehow ignited. To prevent this, all equipment used in a mine, from a miner's cap lamp to the engine of a continuous miner, needs to be made explosion-proof. To see if a device has been engineered to prevent an explosion, it is brought to this government testing facility in West Virginia. Methane will be pumped into the explosion gallery to see if this piece of mining equipment can pass the test.
Well, when it explodes, we have a problem, because if it explodes here, it has the possibility to explode in the mine, and we don't want that.
In a scene reminiscent of a NASA countdown, systems must be brought online. Valves open, and then...
4, 3, 2, 1. If we have an explosion, we go back to the manufacturer, let them know that they need to do some redesign work in order to bring this to a much safer level.
Another crucial test is performed on material called brattice cloth, which are curtains used in mines to control the flow of air.
The test is very important because you want to make sure that brattice cloth that's used in the face area where miners are mining coal does not catch fire and does not propagate a flame, which could end up in a disastrous coal mine fire. So it's important that the brattice cloth be fire resistant.
The cloth proves not to be fire resistant and doesn't pass the test. Fires and explosions are just some of the frightening hazards miners face while working deep underground. On May 2nd, 1972, a fire broke out in the Sunshine Silver Mine in Kellogg, Idaho. When thick smoke from the fire killed an underground elevator operator, the normal day shift of 173 men suddenly found themselves trapped thousands of feet below the surface in a mine thick with fumes. Over 100 rescuers from around the country were called in and worked feverishly to try and save the trapped miners. Jeff Kravitz was one of those rescuers on the scene.
One of the things that will be indelible in my mind is the looks on the family members as we entered the mine and seeing the faces of the family members and the loved ones of the people underground. And I understood what the mine rescue team members were going through. I knew, looking into those faces, that I too wanted to risk my life to help save those people who were underground.
Rescuers entered the main shaft to seal off all passages leaking dangerous gases. The immediate goal was to secure a safe opening to begin the search for survivors. Families of the trapped miners waited anxiously for any news of their loved ones. The dangerous work of creating a safe passage was complete, and there were signs from within that some miners may still be alive. Clinging to signs of hope, the rescue teams were now mobilized. 3 specially designed rescue torpedoes, including one from the Atomic Energy Commission, were flown in to aid in the rescue. Eventually, 2 rescuers boarded one of the capsules for the first dangerous trip down to look for the missing miners. It was a harrowing descent of nearly 5,000 feet. Here, in a recording made at the time, are the voices of the actual rescuers.
You know how to pray. Hello, Jim.
Hello.
We got some survivors down here where they're banging on the pipe.
Roger.
We'll take it real cautious here.
Okay.
We're going to go on ahead now. We can see a light up ahead, so I assume that's where they're on.
You can see the light?
Yes, sir.
Good.
The miners themselves were also quite elated, but they didn't know exactly what to think because they had been underground for over a week. And they saw these lights coming at them, and they thought that angels were coming after them, and this was their last moments on Earth. And lo and behold, the angels turned about to be mine rescue team members.
2 miners who had been stranded at the 4,800-foot level were finally found by rescuers. At the entrance of the mine, wives of 2 of the surviving miners waited anxiously yet joyfully. The wife of one of the miners was quoted as saying that she would never give up hope and had no intention of being a widow at 18. The men emerged from the mine entrance, weak but in good condition. Both miners, who had been underground in pitch-black darkness for nearly 7 days, were so dazzled by the lights they almost missed their ecstatic wives. The miners survived by staying close to one of the only fresh air shafts that was still functioning. Officials rushed them to a nearby hospital for an examination, and they were soon released. Tragically, of the 173 men who worked in the mine that day, only 74 ever made it out, making it one of the biggest mining disasters in history. From the ashes of this disaster, new, stricter safety regulations were adopted. In many ways, mining is a much safer job today than it was 100 years ago. And with a 250 to 300 year supply of coal under our feet, it is likely to be a job with a long future. Improvements in safety have been hard won, but many miners have paid for them with their lives. The risk of a cave-in, flood, or fire haunts miners as they labor far below the Earth's surface. And yet, despite these dangers, a strange force still compels this special type of person to the mines.
You don't worry about the getting hurt. You don't worry about the what ifs. You go in and you do your job. If you do your job and you do it safely and you watch your back, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And if something were to happen, I know that there's a good group of guys that are going to come get me.